What if Anakin Skywalker ignited his lightsaber and actually attacked Palpatine when he revealed that he was Darth Sidious? Would they fight to the death? Would they escape? How would things play out from there? Well, that's what we're going to go over today, but it's going to be a much different fan fiction than usual. This is actually a collaboration that I've worked on with PPSW Pente Patrol Star Wars, where we each took a point of view of one of the characters and focused only on what happened with them. Our story path's exactly the same, but he goes through Anakin's view of the story, while I go through Palpatine's view. It really explores what we think Palpatine would have done if Anakin didn't join him. And also, the link to Pente's part is in the description. Check it out after this. He's an amazing guy. Huge shout out to him for nearly 75,000 subscribers. Couldn't have asked for someone nicer. Alright, what if Anakin fought Sidious right now? Darth Sidious, playing the role of Chancellor Palpatine, sat in his office chair, feeling the Force around him, feeling Anakin Skywalker. He could feel the turmoil in the boy, the anger, the fury, the confusion. And Sidious loved it. He received a report recently from the Separatists that Kenobi had engaged Grievous, and the Republic was surely going to win the battle on Utapau, and Skywalker would surely be here soon to inform him that Kenobi had actually engaged Grievous. The war was coming to an end, and Sidious had played the whole thing perfectly. Now, one final step. And as Sidious waited for Anakin, he knew this would be the most fateful moment in the galaxy. He would reveal to Anakin that he is a Sith Lord, and Anakin would join him, or pay the price. Moments later, Sidious heard the doors open behind him as Anakin walked in to greet him. Once again, Sidious could feel the dark side surrounding Anakin. Fear for his master, fear for his wife, anger at the Jedi. Everything was perfect. Anakin informed Sidious of Kenobi, and Sidious said this was good, but that he feared this would not end the war. When Anakin protested, asking what he could mean by all that, Sidious began his plan. He told Anakin the Jedi were plotting to arrest him, or worse. He told Anakin the Jedi Council didn't trust the Senate, and didn't trust the Chancellor, and they didn't trust Anakin. Sidious felt Anakin's turmoil. He knew Anakin agreed, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. So, Sidious continued to coax Anakin down the dark path, explaining that the war ending will only allow the Jedi to continue abusing their power. Sidious told Anakin that he must be the one to protect the Senate, to protect him. He told Anakin to use his knowledge, to use the dark side. And Sidious felt a shift in the Force that felt like a tidal wave as Anakin ignited his lightsaber. Sidious bathed in the anger, the hatred, the fear that Anakin was giving off. This betrayal would give him strength. Sidious used his final straw, telling Anakin that he was the only one that could save his wife from certain death. And Anakin, he did something that Sidious didn't expect. Blinded by his anger, Anakin swung for Sidious's head, going straight for the kill. Of course, Sidious felt this shift in Anakin and had more than enough time to duck under the blade, quickly igniting his own crimson saber. Sidious looked at Anakin and simply smiled, almost laughing because of this. Anakin was not acting as a Jedi. He was embracing the dark side. Anakin wouldn't join him yet. So be it. Sidious was prepared for any contingency, and he blocked every strike from Anakin with ease. Sidious let the battle play out for a bit as he slammed the doors to his office shut with the Force in order to keep everyone away. He wanted Anakin to fight him, alone. Anakin was using his dark side emotions, but using them blindly, unlike how he fought against Dooku. He knew if he wanted, he could strike down Anakin right now, but that would be years of careful, perfect planning out the window. Sidious may have lost today, but Anakin would be his, or he would die the next time they meet. Sidious laughed as the two of them dueled, and eventually, they reached the large window in the office. Sidious slashed the glass away and smiled at Anakin, eyes as yellow as the sun's on Tatooine. He floated down to a trapdoor in the roof, where he had a secret ship hidden in the hangar. He leapt down and got into the ship, taking a moment once again to feel the Force. It was darker than ever, and although his main plan had been temporarily ruined, he had ways to make Anakin suffer. He would not lose. He would have Anakin. He would have victory. He tapped into an audio device, and listening to anyone who may enter secretly, the audio device was planted into his office years ago in case anyone tried to enter. And now he listened to Anakin as he called the Jedi to his office. Sidious heard Windu on the other end say that he would be there soon. Then he heard Anakin pull up the security recordings. Now the Jedi would learn of Anakin's wife from the conversation between the two of them just before the fight. Either he would be expelled from the Order, or he would use his own anger against the Jedi. Even if, somehow, the Jedi keep him around, Sidious would win. He always won. So now, Sidious flew off to the works to gather what was needed before he headed off to his secret lair on the planet Wayland. And as Sidious gathered his Sith belongings, he listened back into his audio device as Windu arrived with a few other Jedi Masters to find Anakin. To Sidious's surprise, the Jedi didn't even mention the part about Anakin having a wife, or how he had grown frustrated with the Jedi. Instead, they went into full lockdown immediately, locking down the Jedi Temple, locking down the Senate. This was the first move that was actually a solid counter to Sidious's meticulous game in years from the Jedi. Sidious was almost excited for the challenge. He embraced it. Getting back into his ship, he left for the home of Padme Amidala. If Anakin and the Jedi wouldn't turn on each other right now, Sidious wouldn't give them a choice. As he flew, he realized he may be spiraling just a bit. He fully expected Anakin to join him. Of course, he was ready for what happened, and he was ready for anything. But Anakin attacking him, and then the Jedi embracing him, was the last thing Sidious needed. So he dove deep into his anger as he arrived at the home of Padme Amidala. Sidious leapt out of his ship and moved as a shadow. There was no time for games. The entire Republic would be looking for him. He swiftly moved through the home, finding Padme lying down. As she looked up in horror, Sidious used the Force to knock her out before she could even speak. Sidious wondered why she looked so frightened to see the Chancellor, so he went to a nearby mirror, looking at himself. As he let the dark side wash back over himself, his eyes had turned yellow. His smile just looked evil, crooked. He was the epitome of the dark side of the Force. He was Darth Sidious, and he would win. He lifted Padme into his ship with the Force and took off into the Coruscant night. Now on Wayland, the home planet of Mount Tantus, Sidious began his new plan. He would need to take drastic measures in order to ensure that he could still come out on top from all of this. With the news surrounding the galaxy of his disappearance, followed by the revelation that he was a Sith Lord, leading both sides of the war, he knew he would never be able to lead the galaxy as Emperor Palpatine. He would have to truly seize control of the galaxy, make them kneel before him, not as Palpatine, but as Sidious. Once more, the Sith would rule the galaxy. While on Tantus, plotting his revenge, Sidious realized he didn't need Anakin, but he could still be destroyed, corrupted. He was still the key to bringing down the Jedi Order from the inside. Sidious wondered if he had realized Padme was gone, Anakin would be crushed by anger, crushed by fear when he did realize, but it would be nothing compared to what Sidious had planned. While he waited for the Jedi to make their move, Sidious contacted the Separatist leaders. After Grievous was killed, the Separatist leadership was in disarray, but had stayed together on Mustafar, waiting for a directive from Sidious. And eventually, Sidious did contact them. He was met by outrage. A few of the Separatist leaders erupted onto the Sith Lord for controlling both sides of the Republic. The leaders were led by Wat Tambor, who demanded Sidious turn himself over to the Separatists to be executed for his betrayal. But he only gave a smile under his hood, lifting Tambor up from across the galaxy. Tambor rose. Sidious began crushing him, crushing his suit, and killing him. Tambor fell to the ground, disfigured and broken, as the rest of the Separatists began frantically apologizing. They were always cowards, Sidious thought. and he explained to them that he had a long-term plan that would now be altered, and he told the Separatists to access every available battle droid, including the millions that were kept in reserve on purpose. The Separatists always drastically outnumbered the Republic, but were held back by the Sith. Now, they would take over the Republic with sheer force when the time was right. Sidious knew what was happening in the Republic. They thought the war was over. They thought they'd won. They'd promoted Bail Organa to take his place as Chancellor. They couldn't be more wrong about this war being over. So Sidious ended the call with the Separatist leaders. His plan to take out the Senate and the Republic was in motion. Now he walked over to his plan to destroy the Jedi, and he opened a door to the cloning facility on Tantus, where cloning engineers from across the galaxy were forced to produce a special clone at a highly accelerated rate. This was an extremely difficult process, but not an impossible one. The clone would be unable to properly function and would likely die days, if not hours after being released, but that did not matter. This clone had one purpose: to die. Sidious looked to the clone creation as the clone opened her eyes, and Sidious stared at a perfect clone of Padme Amidala. He smiled and laughed, a laugh that echoed through the room. Anakin would explode into unstoppable anger after watching his wife die in front of him. While Sidious waited for the Jedi to find his lair on Coruscant, he checked in on the real Padme. She would be kept here in good care until she birthed her children. Sidious had discovered Padme was actually carrying twins, and they would be excellent for future cloning experiments and future dark side experiments. Once Padme gave birth, she would be separated from her children and tortured, as her pain would lead to more nightmares for Anakin, but he would never know she is actually still alive. The confusion would drive him mad. Sidious began to marvel at his own new plans here. Despite Anakin foiling his original plans, he began to like this one even more. The Separatists would overrun the Republic, and he could rule as Darth Sidious. As he reveled in his soon-to-be victory, he felt a vergence in the Force. The Jedi had found his old lair, and in turn had found his Sith alchemy devices. Sidious went to the clone of Padme and brought her into his room on Tantus, where he could perform his own Sith alchemy. He activated his device, sending a hologram of himself to the Jedi. Sidious greeted them with a laugh that sent a shiver down Anakin's spine, and he began speaking, telling the Jedi that he was proud of them for finally finding his lair, taunting them. Sidious could feel his fear, but something was different with Anakin. His anger, fury, resentment of the Jedi had been subdued for the most part, and Sidious realized what had happened. The Council actually did something right. They had rewarded Anakin for finding out Palpatine was Darth Sidious by making him a Jedi Master on the Council. Could that calm him from what he's about to see, Sidious wondered? Well, there was only one way to find out. Sidious told Anakin that he offered his hand to power by his side, and he was denied. Now he would destroy him with the dark side, forcing him to turn. And Sidious felt Anakin's fear grow as Padme was brought into the hologram. To Sidious, this was obviously a clone. Skin as pale as the snow on Ilum, no life in her eyes, with bags underneath them that made it look like she hadn't slept in a month, and looking around like she didn't have any clue where she was. But to Anakin, it just looked like his wife had been destroyed physically and mentally for the last couple days. And as Anakin screamed in horror, Sidious ignited his crimson saber through her back, killing her instantly. Sidious cackled like never before as Anakin's face shifted from despair to anger to confusion, then to fury as he began lifting everything in the room. He began lifting Windu, even began lifting and choking Sidious from across the galaxy. As Sidious rose, his laugh was cut off as his throat closed, so he quickly shot a jolt of lightning into the device, ending the hologram. As Sidious caught his breath, he reached into the Force, reached into the darkness that was Anakin Skywalker, felt it grow, and then It stopped. Sidious couldn't believe it. Anakin truly trusted the Jedi after being made a master. The Jedi he hated above them all, Mace Windu, had found a way to calm Anakin down. This was impossible. Padme was the one thing tying Anakin to the light. Sidious was furious. His grand plan with Anakin, years of perfect planning, pretending to be his friend, manipulating him, gone, just like that. Sidious ignited his lightsaber, cutting down everything in the room, blowing the door away with a blast of Force lightning. The dark side was surrounding him, his anger and fury distorting his face. But after a few minutes, Sidious let the rage flow inside of him, but he let it be controlled. So Anakin was a lost cause to lead his army, to help him destroy the Jedi. So be it. He would just have to die with the rest. Sidious could find someone else to slaughter the Jedi, someone who would do anything to survive, someone who was already engulfed by the dark side, Maul. And so Sidious flew back to Coruscant to break out his former apprentice. He would be able to do this, but they would need to go without being noticed. The Republic was looking for him, but the last place they would ever expect Sidious to be was inside one of the prisons. So Sidious parked his ship in a hidden area of the works he'd never actually been before. This place was horrible, but it was full of the dark side. He loved it. He couldn't use this ship to infiltrate the prison. His ship was being searched for, so instead Sidious began running, sprinting like a blur in the wind to the outskirts of the industrial sector. Sidious kept moving like a blur until he came across a group of clones secluded on some sort of recon mission. It didn't matter what they were doing. They had a ship that could get Sidious into the prison, and within seconds, Sidious went to all five, blasting them in the chest with a burst of chain lightning that shattered their armor, ending them instantly. So he didn't waste any time, getting into their ship, taking off for the prison. And upon landing in the hangar, he moved as an unseen blur again to the control room, where 4 more clones were stationed. He had to make his move and get out of here with Maul before any alarm sounded and the Jedi arrived. Sidious quickly used the Force, snapping the necks of 3 clones, then grabbing hold of the mind of the 4th. Sidious used his mind to access where Maul was being held, and once he had the necessary information, he let go of the clone, who died instantly. Still moving faster than ever, Sidious infiltrated the secret room, designed to hold Force-sensitive individuals, pulling the door off its hinges, crushing the guard with it. He then ripped apart the personal cell holding Maul when he heard 2 lightsabers ignite behind him, and an alarm start blaring through the halls. Maul fell to his knees as Sidious handed him a saber, saying that if Maul wanted to survive, then they must work together again. Sidious and Maul turned around to see 2 Jedi with lightsabers ignited, and around 8 more sprinting into the hallway. Sidious didn't recognize the 7 Padawans. It appeared Maul's cell was heavily guarded, and he still snuck by everyone, but once inside, he was confronted by these Jedi. It likely would have been more, if it weren't for the powerful siege by the Separatists around the galaxy, reigniting the war as Sidious went to rescue Maul. And before Sidious and Maul stood Jaro Tapal and his young Padawan, Depa Billaba and her young Padawan, Aayla Secura, and 5 other Jedi Knights. The Jedi had been rotating to the prison in shifts, and they were the Jedi to get the unlucky draw today. Sidious snarled, knowing they didn't have much time, going in for the attack with Maul following close behind. The hallway was condensed, and the Sith fed on the fear of these Jedi. They targeted the young ones first, quickly killing 3 of the Knights before the rest of the Jedi could even react. Sidious engaged in a duel with 5 of the remaining Jedi at once, while Maul battled 2. He grabbed the Padawans of Billaba and Tapal, cutting them down together with a single strike. Maul cut down one of the Jedi Knights and engaged Jaro Tapal in duel, Tapal using his double-bladed lightsaber, which Maul was very familiar with. As Sidious battled the other 2 remaining Jedi, Aayla Secura and Depa Billaba, clone troopers began firing carefully in their direction. Sidious deflected a bolt into the leg of Tapal, giving Maul an opportunity to cut his head off and engage Secura and Billaba. Maul pushed them hard against the wall as Sidious distracted them, allowing Sidious to throw his lightsaber into the chest of Sakura and electrocute Balaba, killing them both. Now, Maul and Sidious ran down the long halls, slicing up clones. As they moved with a speed the clones could simply not keep up with, cutting them down one by one, using the Force to throw them into each other. The clones stood no chance. As the Sith reached the exit, jumping into the ship that Sidious had stolen. As they looked out the hangar bay, they saw 5 clone transports approaching, likely with Jedi on board. Sidious grabbed hold of one of the transports on the far right, slamming it into the one next to it, creating a chain reaction of explosions as Maul grabbed the controls to fly away. Emerging out of the exploding transport fire, the Sith jumped into hyperspace as the galaxy fell back into war. The next few months would see the beginning of the end for the Republic. The Jedi and clones had celebrated the end of the war, and were caught completely off guard by the Separatist resurgence. It was as if millions of battle droids had been hidden away and suddenly released upon crucial Republic planets. And that's because that's exactly what happened. Sidious orchestrated a complete Separatist overthrow with no mercy on these planets. The Republic, the Jedi, would feel the true power of the dark side, and there was no hesitation from the Separatists as they took planet after planet until eventually reaching Kamino, the home world of the clones. It wasn't even a contest. The amount of droids at Kamino was overwhelming, and the Republic began calling clones and Jedi back to Coruscant, knowing what was coming next. Sidious watched it all unfold on Mount Tantus, getting updates from Maul, who was leading the Separatist armies into battle. Maul had quickly agreed to join Sidious after hearing his offer. Once the war was won, he would be the right-hand man of Sidious as they ruled the galaxy with fear and power. Another month passed after the win on Kamino, and the Separatists had prepared their largest fleet of the entire war. They were going to Coruscant. This would mark the end for the Jedi and for the Republic. There would be no mercy. Darth Sidious grabbed Padme and her children and boarded them on his capital ship. Padme had been here for the entire last year, isolated and tortured in order to torment Anakin. Her children had been kept in excellent shape, well-fed and happy, in order to maximize the cloning experiments. Those experiments were only beginning, and they would continue on Coruscant once this war was over. Padme was to be kept alive until Sidious was completely sure that Anakin was no longer a threat. And the final siege on Coruscant was a massacre, despite the Republic knowing that this day was coming. Separatist ships doubled the Republic in space above Coruscant, and they quickly made their way to the ground to overtake the Senate and the Jedi Temple. As clones and Jedi prepared to do whatever was necessary to defend these places, a voice came over the Republic military frequency. Sidious sat in a throne in his ship, showing the most wicked smile anyone has ever seen. He watched the battle below, knowing the droids were about to overwhelm the Jedi. The droids would now receive the help they needed to end this war immediately. New Chancellor Organa had never removed access to this frequency, so Sidious spoke into the frequency to all the clones. Execute Order 66. And the final slaughter began. Sidious watched as the Jedi Temple went from a strong defense against the droids to a quick and decisive victory for the clones versus the Jedi. The 212th and the 501st, two of the best legions, swarmed the temple, killing Jedi like someone else was controlling them. Sidious could feel the pain below, feel the sadness, the anger, and he could even feel Anakin again. He'd almost forgotten about Anakin on some days, but now he thanked him. His plans may have been delayed a year, but Anakin refusing to join him gave Sidious this opportunity. As Sidious felt the Jedi fall one after another, whether at the hands of droids, clones, or Maul, he knew the battle was over. The Jedi were either dead or living like rats in the underworld. Both were acceptable outcomes. They would be killed in time, and Sidious descended to the ground, far from the temple, as he ordered the bombing run to commence. Any desperate, remaining Jedi would fall to this. and the Jedi Temple exploded into nothing. When the smoke and fire began to fade, Sidious smiled as he imagined the tower he would build in its place. As many weeks passed, after the final battle on Coruscant, the CIS began to rule the galaxy with fear and power. The Senate had little to no power, with many of them killed or taken prisoner for treason against the new ruler, Darth Sidious. Everyone was to be extremely loyal to him and him alone. Sidious was in control of the droid army and the clone army. He knew the clones hated the droids, but their usefulness would fade in time as they aged. Sidious did consider the possibility of a clone uprising, but the inhibitor chips kept them on his side for now. Instead, he had many clones scouring the Coruscant underworld, trying to find Jedi or other traitors. And now, he had a tall, menacing tower built over the wreckage of the Jedi Temple as a sign of his power, and he kept his promise to Maul, who was the commander of the armies, only answering to Sidious. He had won. Months passed. The dark side of the Force was like a poison to the galaxy. Planets were forced to comply with this new rule, or they were killed or cut off from supplies. Sidious was not playing any games. Planets would listen, or they would die. It was simple. And in the meantime, he had heard rumblings of clone deserters, stories of Jedi in the Undercity. They were still just sewer rats at this point, with nowhere to go. And Sidious, he'd been overly occupied with his great plans for the future. Without a threat to his rule, he'd given everything to his cloning experiments, as well as the construction of a new super weapon, the Death Star. Over these months, Sidious spent so much time on these projects, trying to perfect them, trying to control the Force itself, that he failed to realize what was happening right underneath his nose. In the Undercity of Coruscant, Jedi had joined with clone troopers, who began to question Order 66. Along with this resistance, there were a ton of citizens that wanted to fight with the Jedi, to put up a real fight for their freedom. Sidious would hear rumblings of this, sending down droid squads, but he never thought it to be a legitimate threat to his rule. But one day, as Sidious looked down on the planet's surface, he began to see blaster fire in the distance. This wasn't unnormal, but it was just a bit at first, and then more, and more, as it was clear this was a situation that needed immediate handling. Sidious watched as tons of clones and citizens of the planet started running through the streets, taking out droids before they realized what was going on. Sidious scowled as he called Maul to his office. Once Maul arrived, Sidious instructed him to lead a group of Magna Guards into the city, wiping out these traitors. As Sidious was explaining the situation, he had to pause, as he felt something in the Force. For the first time, he felt Anakin and felt nothing but rage. These young Jedi, they were still loyal to them, and he was here now. Anakin was loyal to the Jedi despite everything. Today, Anakin would die at the hands of Darth Sidious. It was his destiny. He called Padme into the room, hands restrained behind her back, as she looked on, distantly unaware of what was happening. Finally, the door to the office opened. Sidious saw a strike team of Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka Tano, Kelleran Beck, and Plo Koon enter his office. Somehow, they'd snuck in, and Sidious stared at them with a smile, taunting them, saying that he has turned the Jedi Order into a group of vengeful animals. He stared at Anakin, and Anakin locked eyes with Padme. He began crying, wondering how this was possible. He saw Padme die all those months ago. This was the perfect distraction, but Anakin quickly snapped back to the moment, staring back at Sidious. Sidious scowled as Kenobi and Ahsoka went to Maul. Skywalker, Beck, and Plo Koon would die swiftly at his hand. Sidious looked at Maul, engaging the two Jedi that he hated the most, Kenobi and Tano, and then Sidious leapt to his three adversaries, matching them strike for strike. He began to laugh the way he had many times before when seeing the desperate Jedi. This would be their end. He swung at Plo the most, a bit surprised at how strong he was with the lightsaber. The 4 saber wielders moved around the office, objects being destroyed, walls being slashed with sabers. Sidious knew Anakin and Plo away for a minute, then took on Kelleran alone. Sidious hit his lightsaber twice, then cut across his arm as he threw Kelleran against the wall, removing him from the battle as Anakin and Plo rejoined the attack. This duo of Plo and Anakin was much more formidable than Sidious expected, with their strengths actually working extremely well off of each other. It was no matter though, as Sidious used an excellent display of parries to separate the 2 Jedi. Anakin's calm demeanor enraged the Sith Lord. Where had the angry, saddened Jedi gone? Had the Jedi truly embraced Anakin enough to help him reach his potential? Sidious would unfortunately never know, as he sent Plo backwards, flying at Anakin, striking at him until Anakin was disarmed with an impressive display of lightsaber skill from Sidious. The Dark Lord smiled, showing his wicked yellow teeth as he struck directly for Anakin's chest. As he did, Plo Koon moved like a blur, sticking himself between him and Anakin. Sidious's blade went right through Plo, and the world seemed to stop. This was the next few moments. Sidious barely noticed as Plo tossed his saber to Anakin behind him, and Anakin began swinging at Sidious as Sidious had his own saber inside Plo's chest. Sidious pulled his weapon out of Plo, but it was too late. Anakin struck him across the face, and Sidious felt himself fall backwards. He knew it was over. This was a decisive blow, and Sidious could feel his life draining. The last thing he ever saw was Maul look to him in shock and proceed to be cut down by Ahsoka Tano. The last thing Sidious felt before he hit the ground and died was the feeling of failure. All his work, his experiments, his power, all of it gone to his greatest failure ever, Anakin Skywalker. And Sidious was gone. He would never see the aftermath of it all. The aftermath was Kelleran on the ground, looking over at the Chosen One and the fallen Grand Master. Plo used his strength to sit up as he put his arm around Anakin's back and brought him in closer, gripping Anakin's hand and telling him the future of the Jedi belongs to Skywalker. Plo lowered himself back to the ground, his breathing shallowing out. Anakin held Plo's hand tighter. Kenobi and Ahsoka ran up behind him. Ahsoka got down to her knees next to Plo, and he turned his attention to her. She grabbed his hand, and in the short moment of peace, with the Sith extinguished, Plo Koon looked over their shoulders, seeing a blue apparition, one that told him to come along. And when Plo took his last breath, his body vanished, and his cloak fell to the ground, taken into the Force by Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin looked around confused. Obi-Wan ran over to make sure Kelleran was alright, and he was. Anakin felt a surreal amount of pressure fall onto his shoulders, but at the same time, it was peace. Ahsoka asked him what was said, and he told her that the future of the Jedi belonged to him. She looked at him inquisitively, but before she could ask, he rose to his feet like a man possessed and ran over to his wife. She had cufflinks locking her hands behind her back. She had bruises across her face. Her eyes had bags underneath them. She looked as if she hadn't eaten in weeks. And Padme looked up weakly. The lack of sleep left hallucinations to play hide-and-seek with her for as long as she could remember. Seeing Anakin in her mind was just another one of these, coming to rescue her, only to be disappointed when the warm embrace disappeared into a fog. But this time, she felt his arms cover her body. He spoke to her, and his voice sounded like a peaceful ocean's embrace. It was all she could ask for in a simple moment, and when she realized it was real, she said his nickname quietly, joyously, but also cautiously afraid still. Though when he wrapped her up, he heard Obi-Wan's cautious voice. Anakin turned his head, seeing 2 children in small tanks being pushed over by Obi-Wan. They weren't newborns, both of them around a year old. It all clicked, but at the same time it didn't. It wouldn't be revealed in the coming minutes that this was a cloning facility, something they didn't know how to understand at this moment. And as the battle intensified, the Jedi had to get out before the castle was taken down. The siege of Coruscant would last for months, It would be terribly bloody, and it would cost the lives of thousands. But without a leader, with the Jedi destroying the super tactical droid, guerrilla warfare would strike down the Separatist war machine. Padme would be brought into a makeshift medical facility, and the children would be kept with her. They would all be healed, brought back into the best health possible. Though for Padme, the trauma of the past year would continue to haunt her. A rebellion would rise, inspired by the fight made by the people on Coruscant. Skywalker, now the Grand Master of the Order, would lead a sneak attack on the Separatist capital, which would allow them to give out a shutdown command to all the droids. It would be a total victory. In the end, the Republic, incredibly fractured, would rebuild. It would take decades to climb back to the level they were once at, but people around the galaxy, all horrified by what war could do, didn't want to see it ever happen again. Of course, the galaxy is filled with creatures that have short memories. Anakin would, with the Jedi Order behind him, move the Order to Dantooine and have his kids raised there with Padme. Of course, the Jedi being on Dantooine didn't mean they didn't or couldn't help people around the galaxy. They actively went out into the galaxy to help those around them, especially beings that people were suffering. Anakin may not have been the youngest Grandmaster in history, but he stepped up to the plate when the mantle was passed down to him. A statue would be erected up in the hall in Dantooine to remember those who had passed and sacrificed themselves before. This new order would be very similar to the one before it, but new virtues and rules being changed would inspire Ahsoka to rejoin the Order. The galaxy would change, but without the Sith, it would be for the better. And while Padme had a lot of recovering to do, mentally, she would be given a chance at a fresh start thanks to the help of the Jedi who rescued her. Luke and Leia would eventually grow into the pride of the Jedi Order when they were of age, each of them being trained by one of Anakin's closest friends. Leia with Obi-Wan, Luke with Ahsoka. Anakin would oversee, but in an effort to remove his own biases from their training, he encouraged the other two and trusted them to train them. This new Jedi Order would continue on for centuries, inspired by those who reinstated it and those who restored the galaxy from evil. That's the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. It was from Palpatine's point of view until, of course, he died. To see Anakin's point of view, to see how this all unfolded in Anakin and the Jedi's mind, to see the Coruscant Rebellion, the underworld, them infiltrating the new building erected by Sidious, go to Pente Patrol's account on YouTube and you can watch it there. It's excellent. It goes through Anakin, how he became trusting of the Jedi, and everything else. Why he didn't freak out when Padme died. All the answers you're looking for will be in that one. Thank you all for watching. I had a blast. Once again, huge shout out to Pente Patrol. Awesome person. Couldn't have asked for a nicer person when I texted them. I'm got like 5,000 subscribers. He's got around 75,000, and he was awesome to work with. So thanks to him. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.